Well, just 4 days remain until the people of South Africa begin voting in their first all-race election. CNN's Bernard Shaw is anchoring our coverage of this historic vote, and he joins us now with some insight. Bernie?
Thank you, Bobbie. This is the final weekend of campaigning before next week's elections here in South Africa. In the coming days, more than 24 political parties, some big, some small, will make their final push for votes. They'll be trying to win the allegiance of more than 22 million South Africans, about 3/4 of whom have never voted. We'll be spending the next 2 weeks covering these events, leading up to the vote, the election itself, and the difficult process forming South Africa's first post-apartheid government. It promises to be quite fascinating. Two of the major candidates in this election, Nelson Mandela, the African National Congress, and F.W. de Klerk of the National Party, met privately today in Pretoria. As he left the meeting, Nelson Mandela said the two men discussed the status of certain prisoners, a shared commitment to maintaining law and order during the transitional period, and the sensitive issue of prisoners voting. Later, Mandela traveled to Johannesburg to visit the stock exchange. In that venue, he stressed the importance of unity, not violence, in ensuring economic strength in South Africa.
To restore economic stability in this country, we have called upon our people now to end mass action. Mass action was the weapon of a community which had no vote, which had no basic rights in this country. The intention of mass action was that we should get our liberation. We have now got the vote, and in 6 days' time, we will exercise that right.
President F.W. de Klerk's campaign trail wound through Cape Town today. Earlier, he spoke to the Cape Town Press Club, saying it is important for the people who fought against apartheid to fight equally hard to maintain democracy in South Africa.
We must rally all the genuinely democratic institutions of our society in a grand coalition for the defense of the Constitution, its principles. Many of those institutions, which were previously in the forefront of the campaign against apartheid, will now have to help to defend the democratic institutions which they themselves have helped to establish.
Meanwhile, the leader of the rival Inkatha Freedom Party is Mangosuthu Buthelezi. After threatening a boycott, the Zulu leader agreed only this week that his party will participate in the elections. So now he has some intense campaigning to do. Today, Buthelezi is in Durban, South Africa, in the Zulu-dominated Natal province. Our man Brent Sadler's there also. He joins us to talk about Buthelezi's campaign efforts. Brent?
Thank you, Bernie. Well, perhaps the most significant development to come out of Natal today is news that the level of political violence is on the wane. That coincides with the decision by Inkatha's chief, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, to contest the elections, although he's left electioneering until the very last moment. Venturing outside his traditional power base, the Inkatha leader led his last-minute campaign into the Transvaal, traditional ANC territory. Looking relaxed among his own loyalists, Mangosuthu Buthelezi warned of the dangers of a sweeping ANC victory. Regional identities could be destroyed, he said, because the country would be ruled by a communist-dominated government.
If the ANC wins the majority, then South Africa faces a very bleak future indeed. The ANC and their communist allies do not want federalism in our country.
The closer the election, the greater the political mudslinging. President de Klerk labelled Inkatha an election enemy and accused Dr. Buthelezi of dirty tricks.
He's trying to snare us with the self-same political lifeline that we threw out to him.
Who's getting a fire? You had to fire.
Although a state of emergency in Natal is still in force, the number of politically motivated crimes has fallen.
If you look at the trend in the last 3 weeks and compare the last 2 days, it's looking very, very positive.
The threat of pre-election violence may have diminished, but the security forces will remain on indefinite alert, particularly during and after the actual voting, when further trouble could erupt. A fifth of South Africa's population lives in this province, and right now a mad scramble is underway to provide them with voting facilities and security for a free and fair election, the result of which will have an important impact on the future of South Africa. Bernie.
Brett, a quick question to you. What is Chief Buthelezi's game plan from here on out?
Well, I think it's fairly clear from what we're seeing so far is that Dr. Buthelezi wants to be seen contesting the election not only inside his stronghold of KwaZulu, but also outside. Hence, he was in the Transvaal today, and he hopes to be in the huge Johannesburg township of Soweto over the weekend. He says he's going to do well in the election. That's impossible to say, to predict accurately. Latest opinion polls suggest that perhaps 2-1 ANC supporters among Zulus will outvote those who support Dr. Buthelezi's party. However, he could reach the magic figure of 5%, which would secure Inkatha a voice in the new government. However, if that were to happen, Dr. Buthelezi has said today that he would not join a unity government under Mr. Mandela and Mr. de Klerk, whom he described as brothers in acts of political deceit and subterfuge. I'm sorry, Bernie.
Thank you. Brent Sattler reporting live from Durban. CNN and CNN International will be live throughout this magnificent nation for the next 2 weeks as we cover what is happening. We spoke with Mangosuthu Buthelezi one-on-one in an interview conducted several hours ago. I asked him what happened that caused him to change his mind about election participation and what he thinks of his opponents.
They signed the record of understanding in the bush, and I think this is what messed up negotiations, and that's why we've had problems. So that's a separate matter from just their integrity as people, because I don't doubt that.
I asked that question because you have decided at the 11th hour to enter the elections. How do you explain your flip-flop to the world? Your flip-flop, your change.
No, but it's not a flip-flop. It's a very principled stand, and I think that even the Wall Street Journal, and I think that the Sunday Times on Easter in London, actually stated that, you know, why I took the stand I took, and in fact how justified it was. So it was not a flip-flop, because I'm not a somersaulter. I'm a very principled politician, and that has been the case throughout my career.
Well, the world is wondering specifically what was told you that caused you to enter into the elections.
No, it's not complicated. The fact that on Monday a special session of Parliament is being called to fix up this issue of our king and the kingdom. I mean, that they recognize that at last, and not only just verbally by saying it, but they're actually going to enshrine it in the constitution of the country. I mean,
to say what?
Pardon?
What will the Constitution say about your people and their land?
To protect the kingdom as an institution, to also recognize the kingdom of KwaZulu, which is almost the same thing as saying that the self-determination of the Zulu people is recognized, and that, you know, there is the principle of asymmetry. Now, to recognize that in the case of the Zulu people, because of their culture and their history, that they'll be a different state from other states because of that history and because of that culture. I think that was a big breakthrough. And also at the same time, of course, things that are not finalized will also be addressed by international mediators. And all of us, Mr. de Klerk, Mr. Mandela, and myself, accepted that.
Assuming that Nelson Mandela becomes the next president, what will you view as your role?
In what? I don't understand.
As a political figure? As a person who
I have a very big, what they call, party in this country, and as a leader of that party, I still fight for what my party wants, you know, the kind of ideal that my people believe in. We believe that the thing that will bring prosperity and peace in this country is a federal structure like you have in America, and therefore this is the thing that we intend pushing for. We're going to try and struggle for that, because we believe that only then can this country be peaceful and prosperous.
In the coming days, CNN also will be interviewing Nelson Mandela, as well as South African President F.W. de Klerk. The split in South Africa's white separatist movement seems to be getting wider. As it stands, the Breakaway Freedom Front is the only right-wing party running candidates in the elections next week. Its main competition, the Conservative Party, has announced it will not take part unless it receives some guarantees that a white homeland will be created after the election, and that is not likely to happen. Coming up, we'll hear from the CNN South African bureau chief here in Johannesburg, Mike Hanna.